Minutes. Wow, that's awesome. Go ahead, Tim.
My name is Tim Barton. I am from Wallbuilders. I'm speaking in favor of SB10 and 11 as well. So, Madam Chairwoman and committee, it's a pleasure to be with you. Following up on some of the thoughts, knowing that there is now legal standing, there is now a history and tradition, and we could go through a lot more history and tradition. I'm going to give a couple examples as well. One of the things that as we talk about public education is apparent for everybody, even as Senator King pointed out, with having family members that are at a school and there were shootings at a school. One of the things that we are seeing is there's a challenge for a rising generation in determining right and wrong. Where oftentimes in public education, we are saying, well, you have to find your truth, and what is your truth? And the reality is there's some major challenges, because if we would ask what would seem like a rhetorical question, is killing wrong? We would say, of course, killing is wrong. But who determines? It used to be there was a very clear moral standard that we could point to that was objective beyond the whim and the feel of the individual. And so even from a moral standpoint, looking at the fact that right now we know that one of the high death rates for young people is gun violence, often related to gangs. And there's levels of irony when we would have kids arrested for breaking the 10 Commandments, and yet have, in some reason in culture, determined that it's inappropriate for kids to see the 10 Commandments, the very things they can be arrested for violating, not following. In fact, even things when we came to testify, we had to check a box, a disclaimer to say we're going to tell the truth in our testimony. Well, guess where that came from? That idea that you're supposed to not bear false witness in giving testimony, that's part of the 10 Commandments. Very much the culture that we live in has been shaped by those morals, and the decay that we are seeing in culture around us has been directly connected to the removing of a moral standard. This is definitely something that should be restored. That's for SB 10. SB 11, this is a book called the Aiken Bible. It's also known as the Bible of the Revolution. This was the first Bible printed in English in America. It actually was printed with the approval, the authorization, and the endorsement of Congress, because up until this point in America, Americans were not allowed the privilege of printing Bibles. It was something that England controlled really since King James came out with the King James Bible. In England, the Anglican Church said, we will control the Bible market, and no American was allowed to print Bibles in the English language. And the Revolution, there was a Bible shortage. And in the midst of the Bible shortage, Robert Aiken, who was the official printer of Congress, went to Congress, and they understood in Congress, there was a petition back in 1777 that they would import 20,000 Bibles from Holland or some friendly nation. It was approved by Congress, but because of the Revolution, they weren't able to bring those Bibles in. Robert Aiken, the guy who did all the printing for Congress, went to them and said, okay, I know we haven't been allowed to yet, but I've been working on a project. If we're separating from the king, could we maybe print a Bible? Well, this is the Bible that came out in 1782, and in the front of this Bible, and by the way, this Bible, there was only about 10,000 that were originally printed. It's considered one of the rarest Bibles, not just in America, but in the world. There's only a couple dozen left in known existence. The majority belong to the Smithsonian or Library of Congress. We've been very blessed that we have one. I brought with me today. And in the front, it actually has an endorsement and recommendation. It says, the United States and Congress assembled highly approve the pious and laudable undertaking of Mr. Aiken, the printer of Congress. But then I'm going to jump down a line or two. It says, and they, Congress, recommend this edition of the Bible to the inhabitants of the United States. So the first Bible printed in English in America came with the approval, the authorization, the endorsement of Congress. But what's more interesting is Robert Aiken, when he made his petition to Congress on why they should do this, he said, we have a Bible shortage in schools. And if we could print a Bible in English, this Bible, and this is from his records, the journals, the annals of Congress, it was, quote, a neat edition of the Holy Scriptures for the use of schools. Congress not only agreed to approve it, they then endorsed. The reason we have the first Bible in English in America was in part so that we would have it in schools. And I know that there's probably going to be people that would come and testify and say, wait a second, but separation of church and state, you can't have religion in schools. This second document is the first printing of George Washington's presidential prayer and Thanksgiving proclamation. This is a newspaper from 1789, and he called on the nation to a time of prayer. And for people that would say, but you have to separate church and state, George Washington was the president of the convention that gave us the Constitution. He understood it pretty well. He's the one who is presiding over things as we become a nation, and he's the one along with many founding fathers that followed up with these traditions, the reason it matters, the founding fathers believed in separate institutions, but not secular institutions. The very idea from the Declaration was that there's a God who's given us rights, and government's job is to protect those rights. To pretend like we can't acknowledge God, well, then we're risking losing those God-given rights. And this is why we are very favorable of support of SB10 and SB11.
Thank you very much. Do you have any other books we didn't cover? Those are all so impressive. I have them under lock and key. You do?
I've got one for Texas.
Okay.
One related to Texas. You mentioned Perry Van Orden, the 2005 case under Governor Abbott actually argued at the Supreme Court. And in 1956, the movie The Ten Commandments came out. Cecil B. DeMille started Paramount Studios. That the commandments came out. This is actually the handbill. Anyone who went to the theater got this handbill. Inside the handbill, it says, hey, there's 32 million human laws, and they all rest on the Ten Commandments. So right up front, you can see what's inside. After this did so well, Academy Awards swept the nation, they said, we need to do something to help really keep this in culture. They put 10,000 copies of Ten Commandments up in classrooms, no lawsuits at all. They made 180 marble monuments and brought them to places like Texas. Our marble monument here in Texas was actually erected in 1961, and Charlton Heston, who won the Academy Award, was the guy who dedicated the marble monument. So literally that monument we have outside that's been through the Supreme Court was the product of Cecil B. DeMille and actors like Yul Brynner and Martha Scott and Charlton Heston going to all these state capitals and making sure the Ten Commandments were there. So that's related to Texas specifically, as our Ten Commandments monument came right out of the movie.
Well, who would have thought? All right. Or trying to bring some sanity back to our, it's a little tangent, to our movies and movie production in Texas. So maybe they'll think back with Cecil DeMille
Cecil DeMille.
And the Ten Commandments. Members, questions for this esteemed panel?